All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Curtis Lake PrimeTime. It's good to have you here with us tonight. And we are joined by a very special guest, somebody that we got to be with this past Sunday, Rickey Bolden. Hello, Rickey. How are you?
I am doing great.
Good. It's good to have you here again. How'd things go with the young adults on Sunday night?
Everything went really well. We had a great time. I thought the teaching was great. And then we had great food. I was just totally surprised at just how many young adults came out, but we had a blast.
Yeah. Did you play football or anything?
No, you know what? They played a lot of ping pong, and I didn't want to embarrass them because I am really good at ping pong.
Absolutely. Right.
And so I decided not to go in and shame them, but just tons of games. We had a tremendous time. And just to see how people were engaged in conversation, in relationships, that was really impressive.
Yeah, it's been really exciting. I mean, we're really only a few months into the start of this ministry, specifically for young adults, and we know that it's got a lot of potential to be a really powerful part of the ministry here at Curtis Lake. So
And
thank
you had
you
a lot
for.
of guests last night, too.
Yeah, I bet. I
Yes.
bet. Yeah. They hear that a former NFL legend is here. I mean, that's just going to bring people out of the woodwork. So for those of you that don't know, Rickey, he is a former NFL player. We've got a couple of your football cards here. This first one, this shows Rickey with hair.
Oh, my.
Did
Yes,
you know
yes.
that? Did you know that? Do
Can
you remember that time?
I remember that time. I know. I enjoyed it, but I enjoy this better.
Yeah. A lot easier to maintain it.
Yes, it
right?
is.
You just get
Yes,
up
it
and
is.
get on with your
That's
day.
it.
So
That's it.
I don't know about this other card though. This other card has a McDonald's logo on it.
Yes.
What's that all about?
My second year in the league, McDonald's came out and you could literally go and they would give you a card of a player, and they had 22 players in this set. And so the goal was to get the entire set, and then you'd get a special prize. But I remember those cards, and literally, it was a scratch off. You could literally scratch off, and they could give you a meal.
Oh, nice.
Even at the time you had the card. So I mean, I've signed so many of those cards.
I'll bet you.
But that was fun too.
Yeah, that's great. So it wasn't about the Cleveland Browns having this kind of weight management program where they were doing all the food through McDonald's or
Oh
anything.
my! You know what? Back in those days, we ate totally different. The players would come to the facilities, and around 11:30, we would get one of the players to go out and pick us up. Taco Bell, McDonald's, whatever it was. Today, they have their own chef. They have a restaurant within the facility, and they really monitor what the players eat today.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. I mean, these are finely tuned athletes.
Oh well, and they're making so much more money
Yeah.
today. I mean, the guy that plays my position that today, he makes $6 million, and I didn't even. I mean, I got about 10% of that, and so it's just a totally different game today.
Yeah. You ever think about coming out of retirement?
Oh,
kind
my
of getting
goodness.
back into the weight room and
Yeah, it
just
was
giving it one more shot?
no man. Listen, my knees and my body, I feel it today, and I have no desire. In fact, I don't even watch it very often because my knees ache just watching it, and just knowing what the players are going to have to look forward to in the future. That is a challenge.
Yeah. Well, Tom Brady wrote a book, right? I don't know if you read it, but
I have not read it.
Tom Brady's got the TB12 method, which is supposed to bring athletes
Right.
into this, even in their advanced age, to this ability to kind of continue on with their career as we've seen him do. So, hey, you might give it a shot.
Let me tell you, Tom Brady is one impressive athlete. I have tremendous respect just for what he's accomplished. And can you imagine? I think it was like a 7th-round draft choice. He wasn't expected to do very much, and all of a sudden, this guy, he will be a legend in the game. Today, I think he's the best player to ever play the sport.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I will tell you that if you type in, I don't know if you've done this, but if you type in Rickey Bolden in an internet search engine, like right at the top of the list, it's still talking about your heralded career in the NFL. So
Oh my, that's
I don't
scary.
think you have anything to be ashamed about when it comes to that. So, but Rickey, NFL days are long gone by, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
tell us about what you're doing now in Washington, D.C., and, maybe a little bit about how you got there. And we got to hear, from your heart, this message on hope this past Sunday, but
Yeah.
you're really about doing that every day, every week. I mean, what does a typical day or even a typical week in the life of Rickey Bolden look like in Washington?
Yes. Well, I pastored about 20 years and really enjoyed the ministry, but my heart began to just really, really ache for discipleship. How do you help people grow? because so often when people go to church and they get engaged with the church, a lot of them don't grow. And so now I just really wanted it to look like the end for me is how do you raise up leaders and how do you help these leaders grow and become more like Jesus? And so we created a great work called Discipleship Works, where we would really focus on leadership. And so I have about 12 young men that are in high school that we're raising up and that I'm discipling. We meet on a regular basis and just to really pour Jesus into. I have a group of businessmen that I work with that I'm really, really asking the Lord to just grow up like never before so that they can impact the business community. I have about 4 guys living in a place we have called 859, and that we're just doing on-site training of these guys. And then finally, I have a group of leaders on the Hill that I am. We're having a Bible study every week, and we're really talking about how to impact the world for Jesus. And so, and even around the country, I travel a lot now. And I have this wonderful opportunity to go around and meet leaders around the world just to talk about Jesus. And so it's all about how do we help guys grow? And really, it's because of the model of Jesus. Jesus chose 12 great leaders. I mean, these guys weren't just guys that were going through the motion. They were leaders. And Jesus poured his life into these leaders, and he impacted the world like never before. And that's my prayer. Today, that God will use me to raise up leaders.
Yeah, that's awesome. How do you, when it comes to these high school students, how do you identify who those students are going to be? Are they people that just kind of sign up? Are they like, how do they ultimately get into this really cool mentorship opportunity with Rickey Bolden?
Yes, yes. Well, and I have 4 other guys working with me. But when I first started at this school, it's a Christian school. I just started to volunteer. And I've started volunteering with the basketball team. I would coach basketball, and I would meet these guys. And then the principal of the school asked me if I would do a couple of chapel services, and that was okay. But I asked him if I could take 10 guys that I could select after the chapel service, and if I could pour my life into those kids, because 90% of them did not have a father. And I knew that I really needed to, pull these guys away and just basically deal with what a man really looks like. And so that's how I really pulled the first crew together. And we've been doing it every year. We get a different group of guys. And now it's just amazing. I've been there for 4 years now. And now I'm pulling all the guys that I've discipled together. And we're going to really, really just lay out plans for their lives and say, well, how in the world do you come back into the inner city and make change in the inner city? Because most people are trained, once you go to college, don't go back to the inner city, move to the suburbs.
Sure.
And we really want leaders to go back into the inner city and be change agents in the inner city.
Yeah. Have you seen any of that happen? I mean, do you have any like just kind of success stories or a success story of,
Yes.
this kid that maybe was facing a lifetime without a lot of hope, or it just felt like the ceiling was really, really low for what they could accomplish, but you just seen the world absolutely open up to them, as a result
Yes.
of being discipled. And
Yeah, I was telling people the other day just about this one kid, and he's probably the first year I coached, he was on my team. And I won't ever forget the day he walked into practice and he said, "Coach, I need to go home early from practice today." And I asked him, I said, "Well, why do you need to go home?" And he said, "I think my mom's dead." And I looked at him and I said, "What in the world do you mean your mom's dead?" And he said, "This morning I woke up and I went out and I tried to talk to her, but she wouldn't say anything back to me." He said, "Then I went and shook her and she didn't move. So when I reached down to hug her and I put my cheek up against her cheek, she was really cold." He said, I think she's dead." And so it just shocked me because I'd never heard of that before. And now, just to see him 3 years later, and now he's on his way to college, and he is sharp. He wants to be a medical doctor.
Wow.
And he is really sharp. But just to see this guy be impacted by this trauma, and I don't know anyone that would have done so well with it, but he simply just, he's tough. And he's probably one of my favorite guys. Now, he's more like a son to me. I stepped into his life and I said, "Hey, I'm going to ask the Lord, what is it that you're going to need to be successful?" And so now I'm teaching him how to drive. I said, "You're going to have to be independent," because that's what the goal of, parenting is to help empower our children to be independent. And so I said, I'm going to teach you how to drive. I'm going to teach you how to save. So I went, helped him get a savings account, got him a job. He was working for Chick-fil-A, and just really trying to teach him independence. And so I'm just looking forward to what God is going to do. I still spend a lot of time with him, but he is just one of the guys that I pray for all the time. Every time I go to school, I'm looking for him. And I just think he's going to just hit a home run in college and do so well. But he will also come back to the city and make an impact in the inner city.
Yeah, that's amazing. And, what's interesting as I listen to you talk about that, I mean, there's no program necessarily, like not this regimented curriculum necessarily that you're bringing somebody through. I mean,
Right.
this is a nitty gritty, one-to-one, like coming alongside another human being.
That's right.
And loving that person and helping them walk through what is,
Yes.
to you and me, probably just an absolutely confounding set of circumstances.
Yes. That's what discipleship is. It's parenting.
Yeah.
When we take our children at such a young age and we live with them, they begin to pick up and they watch us and they see what we do and they begin to mimic what we do. And so if we're generous, then they're going to be generous. If we have a vibrant relationship with the Lord, then they'll have a vibrant relationship with the Lord. They watch us. Discipleship, certainly it is taught, but it is more caught than taught. And so I tell people, children are not really listening to what you say. They're watching what you do. And so that's what we look forward to. We say, how in the world before we can ever disciple anyone else, we have to first disciple ourselves, because we want them to see Jesus in us.
Sure.
And so when I take the guys away for the weekend, I don't change my schedule. I have my devotion. And a lot of times they'll come interrupt me in my devotion. And I want them to be able to do that because I want them to see that that's a value of mine. Just as I want my children to see me having a devotion so that they can begin to pick it up and see that it's a value of mine, and they can begin to reproduce that in their own lives.
Yeah. I mean, you got my mind racing too. How do we see that kind of thing is happening in a community like ours? Because
Yes.
I mean, you're in a much more urban community.
Right.
We're more rural, but we're no stranger to poverty, and we're no
Right.
stranger to students that are in situations where they're not getting a lot of support from home. And the best thing that happens to them is what happens to them at school over the course of the day. And hopefully they're running into teachers that are speaking into their lives and helping them. But the job of a teacher is to deal with lots of kids, right? I mean,
That's right.
they're dealing with scores and scores of kids. That what sounds like that really one-on-one mentoring is something that appears to be very, very vital, but also very absent
Right,
in a lot
right.
of our communities.
It was amazing that yesterday I was at church here, and I was just so impressed that I was with Terry, and she introduced me to a couple. And the way the couple introduced themselves to me was, Terry and Scott mentored us. I was just so impressed with that there was something here, and there was a system here that allowed this adult couple to be mentored. Because believe it or not, just as children need to be mentored, when an adult comes to Jesus, they need to be mentored. And what happens is, as they grow and as they mature in Jesus, then they turn around and they mentor others. That's what Jesus did, and that's what the disciples did. And so how do we have a revolution of adults saying, everyone that comes into this church, we're going to make sure that we put a partner with them, someone who can walk with Jesus with them, and someone that can help them grow. Because the ultimate goal really in discipleship, I mean, just imagine if you had a group of adults that they didn't come to church to get anything. They come to church because God really brings them here to minister to other people. And so they literally come and they're praying and they're asking the Lord, who are you sending to this worship environment so that we can impact that person? Because today the church has become really such a place for entertainment. We come to get.
Sure.
But imagine if we could reverse that, where just imagine 50 people who show up here on Sunday morning and their entire goal is to be praying and saying, God, who do you want us to minister to? And I'm telling you, it will change the game because that's really discipleship. And you know you're doing it well when you really flip that attitude. And the attitude is not, what am I here to get, but what am I here to give? That's what Jesus was all about. To say, man, how in the world do I come to this world that is very uncomfortable and give my life for all of humanity?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the good news is we have some people listening to this podcast right now, and they're going to be the first ones to sign up for
Yes.
just that. So I expect that this Sunday
Yes.
will be an absolutely
A
incredible.
line.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's shift to the work that you're doing on Capitol Hill.
Yes.
So you spend some time with legislators, and you're not a person that's going there with any particular agenda, right? Other than, again, to provide some leadership and discipleship among those that want to participate in this.
Yes.
You're not trying to get some legislation pushed through Congress
Right.
or anything like that. So what's that look like for you?
You know what it is? It is probably the most awesome thing and most awesome experience I have ever experienced because I don't go there as a Republican or a Democrat. I go there as a Christ follower, someone who loves Jesus and wants to continue to push them, toward Jesus. And so no matter which side it is or who shows up, I can go in and continue to prompt people in a direction toward Jesus. And really, if you walk on the hill today, it's polarized. Really, it's people, they almost hate one another. And it's sad. And so when I go there, my objective is to say, God, how in the world do we get Christ followers first to understand that they will know that people will know that they're Jesus's disciples by their love for one another. And so there is the possibility that Democrats and Republicans can be friends. They don't have to agree, but they can be respectful and that they can be friends. And believe it or not, that's a challenge within itself to say, wait a minute, that Jesus comes along and he says, in John's gospel, Jesus says that they will know that you're my disciple by your love for one another. But what if the person says, well, you know what? Maybe I don't want you to be my brother. I just want you to be my neighbor. Then Jesus comes along and says, love your neighbor. But then if you don't want them to be your neighbor, you say, okay, well then what if they're my enemy? But then Jesus comes along and says, love your enemy. That there's not one single person outside of our faith or inside of our faith that we should not and cannot love. And so just to really sell them on, guys, listen, you don't have to agree with one another, but you have to be respectful. You have to be loving. You have to be patient. You have to be kind, because really that's the goal of spiritual maturity, is that when the fruit of the Spirit manifests in our lives, and the only way that they manifest, Jesus says, I am the vine and you are the branches. If you remain in me, you'll bear much fruit. And so as long as we can remain in Jesus, then we can look at people, no matter what the differences are, and love them unconditionally.
Yeah. I remember you telling me in some of the conversations that we've had about this concept of building bridges.
Yes.
Trying to bring people together. And you have people that are living with different perspectives that are very, very different from one another.
Yes.
Right? Polarizing is the word to
Yes.
describe, where their agendas are, right or wrong.
Yes.
Half the people in the country, go on one end, half the country goes on the other end. And in this building of bridges that you're talking about, I mean, I can tell you that we who are viewing from afar, like, it just looks hopeless.
Yes.
Many of us, we look at what's happening among legislators, and it just feels like, well, whoever's got the numbers, like, they're going to get their policies and their agendas
Right.
pushed through, right? And we understand that there's, politically speaking, that is a reality. I mean, that's kind of how
Yeah.
it works, and the pendulum swings in a direction, and then, perhaps after some time it swings in the other direction.
Yeah.
But I mean, a lot of the normal everyday folk, like this guy, we want to see some of that civility return. I mean, is there anything that you see happening in Washington, D.C., and be honest, but like, is there anything that you see that would give us hope that might actually happen? Or, are we right to think that this is just a lost cause of getting these people to get along?
Right. And so, like, I always work with in extremes. And two of the brothers that come to the study, they're on the same hall of AOC. and they're Republicans. And so it's just been so fun to process with them because once she said something that really offended one of them. And so I said, well, so how have you built relationships with her? And they said, well, I haven't built a relationship. And I said, that's the first step. And so my challenge to them is, why don't you stop by her office and ask if you can come and sit down with her? And she's going to naturally honor you because you are another congressman. And I said, just go in and just say to her, you know what? I just thank God that God placed you here strategically on this hall. But, I also want to say that you said something and it broke my heart. And I said, let that be the start of a relationship. Because she is not the devil himself, much as we want to believe it. And she is a person that Jesus wants us to reach. And so it's just so funny that it was a struggle. And it took about 3 months for him to do it. But he finally did it. And I was just so proud of him. And so it's really saying, how do we get people to take these steps? Really the steps that Jesus would take to go across the aisle. I had a friend who came to D.C. one time. And he knew about my study. And he said, and I told him, I said, I want to take you outside of your out of your comfort zone. And so he's conservative. And I said, I really do, because whichever side you're on, I'm going to take you outside of your comfort zone. And so I said, I want to take you somewhere and I want you to do me a favor. And he said, okay. And I said, I really want to push your comfort zone. And so he's really conservative. And so we were walking down in the Ryan building, which is one of the 3 buildings that house the Congress. And we're walking in the Ryan building. And all of a sudden I stopped. And he looked and saw the picture of Maxine Waters. And he just looked and I said, come on, we're going in here. And he said, no, I'm not going in there. And I said, yes, you are. Come on, let's go in. It was like pulling teeth. And I said, let me tell you about Jesus. Do you think Jesus would stand outside and not go in and say hello? We have built barriers and walls up so high. And I said, believe it or not, if you heard Maxine Waters, if you heard her testimony, she loves Jesus. She just believes something different. And that's not bad or good, it's just different. And so my goal is to say, how do I push people out of their comfort zone? Because Jesus did it all the time. We see that the disciples, I say there were 1 or 2 ways the disciples always felt. They were always either amazed or afraid.
Right.
Always.
Always, yeah.
They were, can you imagine being on a ship? Hey, Jesus, it's a ghost. They were always either amazed or afraid. And that's when we grow, when we get pushed into these spaces where we're either amazed or afraid. And I love meeting people that are different, that pushes me out of my comfort zone. But I think that if there's going to be hope for us politically, because congressmen, they have to go back to constituents and people in their communities. And it's rather scary to tell them, I met with Maxine Waters and we had a conversation. And so to see the hope, it's going to have to come from the constituents because they're there to please them.
Sure.
And so that's going to be the biggest challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you, as you're counseling and talking with and discipling these folks, business leaders, young people, the reality is, like, we live in this world where there are all kinds of different ideas swirling around. And I think we would all agree, or at least we would verbally assent to the idea that we should listen to one another. Mm-hmm. Now, do we do it? Probably not, right?
Right.
We probably do a terrible job of actually listening to other people, but we know intellectually,
yes,
what it means to be a good person, a good citizen, living in a diverse society. Is we need to listen to other people.
That's right.
But at some point, even if you have gone through the process of listening to another person, of hearing them, of trying to put yourself in that person's shoes, and then like if we're going to use the political scene as an example here, at some point you might not agree, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
The reality is, like, we're not necessarily looking for conformity, right? There are plenty of people out in the world that I will never convince to think or believe a certain way, like
Right.
I think or believe. So that isn't necessarily always the goal. But how do you help a person navigate that really tricky line of this is something I'm very, very passionate about, like very passionate about it. It is dear to my heart. And it happens to be different from the way this other person sees it. Like, what does it mean to walk with that other person in love
Yeah.
and yet hold on and remain passionate and firm about that thing that you believe? I mean, it's got to be an incredibly tricky thing to do.
Oh, you're exactly right. And that's why I said is that whenever I go around people, and that's why I say that I don't ever posture myself to take a, either a position on the left or the right. I try to stay in the meeting, stay in the middle, but then and I also watch both news stations just to hear what the people that I'm speaking with, what they're listening to. And so what I try to do is to say, how do the key is to are the fruit of the spirit. And so I don't care what happens. The fruit of the spirit is what holds the relationship together. And so that if you're loving and if you really love that person, if you that's the fruit of the spirit. You have got to be 100% dependent upon God's spirit. If you're kind to that person, you have got to be 100% dependent upon the Holy Spirit. Yeah. I mean, if you have to forgive this person, oh, you must be 100% dependent upon the Holy Spirit. Gentleness or self-control. And so I believe that when, the whole reality of Jesus saying, I am the vine, you are the branches, you've got to remain in him. Because what will happen, and what I see happen all the time, is people will get passionate about an issue. And then they'll break relationships because of an issue. No, your passion should go and be connected to Jesus. Your passion should be good. And then Jesus will take care of the issues. That's what and so I never allow my passion for an issue to sabotage relationship. Now, I do get frustrated with people sometimes, but I will always come back, Holy Spirit, is that you or is that me?
Yeah.
And most of the time, it's me that's frustrated. And I'm trying to defend an issue or a position. I never can put position or issues before relationships. Jesus died for us to have relationships with him and have relationships with one another.
Right. Yeah, that's great. And, speaking of issues, which I don't even like calling it this, and I don't mean to, we're kind of running out of time, but
yes.
and I don't mean to open a real big can of worms, but certainly another thing that we're facing as a society, which maybe we feel a little less here in Maine than you probably do down in Maryland and Washington, D.C. and some of the more urban areas is this matter of race relations.
Yes.
Right. And you have, I think you have people that have different mindsets about where we are as a country, as a people in regard to racism. And then based on that, like, how do we actually solve it? Right. And so you have political organizations that are trying to advance, some particular agenda as a solution or some mitigation for racism. Right. And you have other people that think, well, those organizations are bad and they're kind of going about it all wrong. And we're, what's, in 2021, what's your take on all this and how can we do better?
That's the hope we have with our young people, because, my generation, we never faced racism the way we face it today. I mean, it is out in our face. The George Floyd incident just really, it exploded. You have groups like Black Lives Matter that, that began to march and bring certain issues to the surface. Then you have this whole piece on defund the police. And so this urban community, it really elevated this entire deal on race. And what I tell people is, first of all, like sometimes I watch certain news stations, and so they'll go in and they'll make an opinion on a group like Black Lives Matter. And I always say, you've got to make sure you understand that African Americans are very different. And I would say, yes, there is a group of people that enjoy and support Black Lives Matter. There are a lot of people that support the name Black Lives Matter, but not the organization Black Lives Matter. And so when you start looking at African Americans, they're all over the place. Even defund the police. You know, when I first heard that term, I said, that's the craziest term we've ever had. We better have police in this country.
Yeah,
That would
right.
be crazy. But, you know, and so, but a lot of people, they don't really mean defund the police or get rid of the police. So what they mean is, like when I was a kid, I had a recreation center to go to when school was over, and that really entertained me. Or we had police officers in our school building relationships with us. Or police officers were walking up and down the street talking to us, building relationships. A lot of the police officers lived in our community. And so I think that policing, it needs to be reorganized so that it could really focus on relationships, because that's the key. And so even as we begin to look at rates, whether it be with police officers, whether it be with our brothers and sisters, I think that we're at a historic time. And then there are other things that's really causing problems with relationships. The inner cities being gentrified. And so we see a lot of, you know, the inner cities, a lot of the poor and urban being kicked out, and out of the inner cities, and now whites are coming back into the city, and so the whites don't really sense that tension, but that tension is there.
Yeah.
And so,
So how does that happen? Because we hear the term all the time, but that's a process, right? That takes
yes,
some time and
10 years,
yeah, and ultimately you see, whoa, just what just happened here,
right?
Where are the poor going?
Right. So like, even I'll use my neighborhood because it's happening in the neighborhood that I live in, and even the neighborhood I was raised in. And so in 2002, I went in, and it was poor. There were killings. And so we saw this, and we went in and we moved into an apartment, and we started this wonderful work in an apartment. And we saw this building across the street that a couple of guys had been killed in. Drug dealers were there. And so we decided we'd go to HUD and see if we could purchase that building. We purchased that building for $25,000. And we renovated the building, one of the nicest buildings in the neighborhood. And then all of a sudden, over time, you see people come in and start buying that property. Well, today, that building is worth $800,000.
Wow.
The poor can't afford it.
Sure. Yeah.
So guess what happens? They're moving out. And now they're moving out in the state of Maryland, which George's County is in Maryland. They're moving out there. And guess what's happening to crime and violence? It's rising in Prince George's County. Now they're suing D.C. for gentrifying all those people into their county. And it is just ugly. And so now it costs so much to live in the area that I moved into. It's so expensive, the poor can't live there anymore. And so when they were there, they could rent an apartment for $400. Now it's over $3,000 to rent an apartment. And so that's what gentrification is. It is not just simply racism, it's classism. It is the rich coming in and really moving the poor out and replacing the poor.
Yeah. And like, how do we mitigate that? How do we?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the,
You know what? So like for example, anywhere I go, no matter where I go, where I live, I tell people buy real estate quick, because the poor could have bought those houses $10, $15, $20, $30,000. When I bought mine for $25, all those places around them, they were going for $25,000, $30,000, and they never purchased anything. And so now that's when people see, oh wow, I live probably a 4-minute drive from the Capitol in D.C. And all that property is now so expensive, no one can afford it. Even middle class can't afford it now. And so it's really nothing that they can do but move and try to find places that are less expensive, which is often outside of the boundaries of Washington, D.C. Yeah. It's sad. And a lot of times when people see racism, I say that racism is challenging, but it's also classism. They're cousins. And so it's not just simply black versus white. It's also rich versus poor.
sure. Absolutely.
I remember when I went to Georgia and I heard a guy use the term redneck, and that was and I was like, why would you use that term? That was a classism term that says these guys are poor. And so even though they were white, they were poor. And so a lot of the tension that comes, it's not just black and white. It is also rich versus the poor.
Right. Yeah. And that's certainly something that we can identify with here.
Yes.
And why I think as a church, we want to always try to maintain and grow in our vigilance of, what does it mean to serve the poor?
Yes.
Because you might walk around Sanford, Maine or this area and not necessarily see the kind of diversity that you might be more apparent in more urban areas.
Yes.
But the reality is that classes do exist. And I think about the kids that are growing up with, again, just like this feeling that their ceiling is so low.
Right.
What does it mean to serve, and what does it mean to give hope? And you gave us one great idea, and that is that you go out on your front lawn and
Yes.
with a couple packs of hot dogs and hamburgers and you just start grilling.
That's it.
Right. And anybody
Build
that walks by,
relationships. Yes.
you feed them, have a talk with them, and
Yes.
and demonstrate Jesus's love that way. So
That's right. And people will ask for hot dogs too.
they will.
Yeah, they will.
Yeah. So, well, this has been great. Well, speaking of hot dogs, are you hungry?
Yes, I'm
You are?
good.
All right. Because now we're going to kind of segue into our final segment of this podcast. We're going to go to Moldova. You've probably never been there.
No, I've never been to Moldova.
So we're going to go out to Moldova and check out this recipe that I got to create with our friends Patty and Mary. Thank you so much for joining us this week. Check out this recipe, and we'll see you next Wednesday.
Welcome to our final episode. I'm Mary.
I'm Patty.
I'm Josh.
Glad to have you with us, Josh.
Thank you. It's good
Yes.
to be here again.
And today we are making Moldovan
Alavenchi, I believe. it's
Alavenchi.
pronounced. Yeah. Which is dessert.
Alavenchi.
Which might explain why Josh is, on time and everything. So
I would miss it.
yeah. So this is a dessert that all the grandmas know how to make. So it's one of those typical comfort food desserts that you had at grandma's house. So also kind of known to be as a peasant dessert because it's kind of a mix of some local cheeses that they would have right there, and it's like farm cheese and things, and then cornmeal, which is not a typical thing that we put in our desserts, but I think it's going to be more like a cornmeal, a little bit of orange in it, a little bit of a cheesecake texture to it, I think. So that's what I'm expecting.
You know me, when it comes to food, I'm game for anything.
Right. As long as there's sugar in it, right? All right, so we're going to start off with, we're going to put Josh to work for a second. So I need some orange zest.
Orange zest.
Yeah.
Okay.
I need zest to be
Zesty.
orange right there. And then
It's zesty.
we're just going to kind of start
Am I just
mixing
gonna
this
go
all
like this?
together. Yeah, you can put a little muscle in it, Josh. Make sure you go the right direction, all that stuff. Yeah, there you go.
Wow.
Look at
That's
that.
very zesty.
It's fruit. He's allergic, right? No, you eat fruit,
Oh,
right?
I love fruit.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, we're not doing a vegetable dessert, so.
Okay.
All right, so we have 3 eggs in here. We're gonna put 3 eggs in there. We have 10 tablespoons of brown sugar. Fun little tip when you're thinking about tablespoons, think of a stick of butter. A stick of butter is a half a cup, but it's also 8 tablespoons. They have little markings on them, so you can remember that.
It's also more than you need for a bowl of popcorn if you cook it yourself.
That's true too. So I did a half a cup and then 2 extra tablespoons when I measured out the brown sugar. We have a half a stick of butter melted. We're gonna pour that in there. We wanna make sure we get all of our butter, so. And then Mary, I'm gonna give you a whisk. We're gonna whisk that together a little bit. And then we're gonna start putting in our fun stuff. That looks yummy.
Ooh, yes.
So we've got some yogurt that can go in.
Use this. This is plain yogurt, correct?
Plain, it's actually Greek yogurts because you want the higher fat content in it.
There we go.
Greek yogurt has a lot of protein in it too.
This in?
And then
Yes.
we've got some mascarpone cheese. So they use a farmer's cheese. I saw some recipes that called for cottage cheese. Some use cream cheese. We're gonna go with a mascarpone cheese
Whole
today.
container.
The whole container goes
Okay.
in.
Probably want to use cheddar cheese, huh?
Probably
That's my
not, but
favorite.
you know, you can try it at home, Josh. No rules, right? So we've got some flour. We've got some cornmeal. This is a nice fine cornmeal. And we can put that orange zest right in there on top, and then you're gonna whisk all of that in just really lightly.
All of it?
Yeah.
All right.
We have a buttered dish. We're gonna put it in the buttered dish and spread it out. We're gonna bake that at 350 for about 40-45 minutes. And then we're gonna come back and we've got a little finishing touch to go on the top as well. That'll make it a little extra special. All right, so our Alavenchi cornmeal cake from Moldova just came out of the oven. It smells like orange zest. It looks gorgeous, but we're not quite done with it yet. So I warmed up a little bit of milk with a couple tablespoons of sugar in it, and we're just gonna pour it over the top. Definitely gonna get your calcium out of this dessert right here. And that should soak right in. Make a little help. So, and after a couple of minutes of soaking it in, we're gonna plate it and serve it with a little bit of jam. All right, so we're gonna scoop up a piece of this right here.
Thank you.
And if you'd like a little bit of jam on it.
Jam?
Jam.
What kind of jam is this?
Oh, wait, Josh. Do you want a centerpiece?
No.
Good? Okay.
I want. Yeah, it's fine.
That is
What am I doing with this?
boysenberry jam. They use-
Boysenberry.
Blueberry is a typical one they use, but I happen to have boysenberry, so I thought it would go good with it.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Give that a taste and let us know what you think, Josh. We're so
Okay.
excited.
All eyes on you.
I'm gonna start with the boysenberry.
We're rating the boysenberry?
Yeah, the boysenberry is good.
Good. Oh, wow. Definitely a very dense cake. Really strong orange zest flavor.
It is very strong.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Not bad strong though, right?
No, but I'm glad it's in there
Yeah.
because otherwise you wouldn't have needed me here today.
But it's very dense. It is what I was expecting was kind of like a cheesecake density, and it is very similar to that. I don't really taste the cornmeal a whole lot, but I think that adds to the texture of it.
I say that's a winner.